Good day, my name is Bluesuit and today I'll be going over my review of the 2D Souls-like dark fantasy Metroidvania known as Sultan's Sacrifice. In Sultan's Sacrifice, you play as one of the spell-marked Inquisitors, and although you should have died in the game's opening sequence, the Mage Bane Rite has kept you alive for one purpose: killing mages in the name of the Inquisition. And these mages aren't your run-of-the-mill gown-wearing types either. Their twisted minds have reshaped them into evil giants who wield the destructive nature of the elements that have destroyed this once peaceful kingdom. As with many Souls-like games, there isn't really much of a direct story in Sultan's Sacrifice, but instead little tidbits of information that slowly build up the lore of the world around you. As the game begins, you're thrown into the hub world where you can craft, upgrade, level up, shop, and take on missions. These elements are quickly introduced to you in the game's early hours and will have a huge impact on how your character plays. One of the largest systems is how Sultan's Sacrifice handles crafting. In a lot of ways it reminds me of Monster Hunter actually. As you take down mages, we'll use the Pyromancer for example, killing it and their minions will get you fire materials that you can use to make an array of fiery weapons, armors, and trinkets as long as you have the required materials. And each mage has their own set of gear that has different weapon types and attributes as well, so mixing and matching it all to create the unique character you want feels really rewarding. There's also a lot of gear that drops randomly from enemies to add to your inventory as well, and all of it can be upgraded to let you take on harder foes as you progress through the game. The second big mechanic that makes a comeback in Sultan's Sacrifice is the leveling system. When you kill an enemy, you earn salt that can then be spent back at base to level up, granting you a little bit of health and an all-important skill point for the game's massive skill tree. In all honesty, it's not as big as it looks because most of the nodes are attribute points like strength or endurance, but it's still definitely big enough to provide a ton of replayability, and it's an improvement over the previous game. With Sultan's Sacrifice's skill tree, you aren't so pigeonholed into one branch, meaning that if you want to specialize in things that are total opposites like magic and heavy armor, it's much easier to do so now, which opens up the possibility for a lot more creative builds. The only thing that's really annoying about it though is the UI. You have this huge sprawling skill tree, yet the window you have to look at it through takes up less than half the screen. Combat in Sultan's Sacrifice is probably its biggest and best system, and in a lot of ways takes everything from the original game and improves on it. Each weapon type feels unique with its own animation, speed, and damage, and there's even magic that you can use too. You weave together light and heavy attacks to create simple, fun combos that is mechanically simple, yet deepens when you add in all of the gear and enemy types in the game. I was sad to see that the parry mechanic from the first game is no longer here though, but instead replaced with weapon skills, which many weapons don't actually have, but are nonetheless really fun to use. I went for two-handed maces, and one weapon in particular, the Drowned Great Hammer, let me spew torrents of geysers from the ground to damage enemies. These abilities are charged by attacking foes, and each weapon's ability felt uniquely powerful and ranged from buffs and debuffs to a myriad of direct damage. On the other end of the fighting are all of the enemies. In my time with the game, it didn't really feel like too many of them had been reused, and learning each enemy's movements and attack patterns was a fun and addicting cycle, especially when it came to the bosses. Generally, Sultan's Sacrifice's bosses hit really hard, but with slow, telegraphed attacks, so the first few times you fight them, they feel really tough because they can just kill you with one combo, but they're much more manageable when you learn what their animations are. When you first find these bosses though, they aren't in their arenas, but actually out roaming the level elsewhere. You'll have to find them and smack them around a bit until they move to a new location, and then rinse and repeat until they finally retreat to where you're actually supposed to fight them for real. It can be chaotic because in the level you usually have to fight them with the help of their minions or the regular level's enemies, or if you're unlucky, there might be another mage that you'll have to fight at the same time. It's definitely a deviation from the previous game. The problem with it is that it just doesn't add anything rewarding. In this stage, the boss doesn't have any health bar, and your only reward for going through this is that you get to actually fight the boss. Right now it just feels more like a chore that disrupts the flow of the game and would definitely benefit from some added incentive, like if the damage you did in this phase affected the actual boss fight. There are several bright sides here though. For one, the mage's minions don't play well with other mage's minions or the level's default enemies, so they will always be fighting with each other when you show up, netting you some free salt. And secondly, if you die, your progress is saved, so you don't have to start the hunt all over again if you die. And finally, Sultan's Sacrifice is a really easy to use co-op system that makes finding and giving help super easy. And if you dole out help often enough, you can earn Dawnlight tokens to trade into the Dawnlight faction for nice rewards. The last thing about Salt and Sacrifice that I'd like to bring up is the level design. Instead of a singular connected world like the previous game, now you have your hub world and several huge worlds that you can travel to kill enemies and go on missions and stuff. Overall, it's great how huge the world is, and there are plenty of little secret shortcuts that help you get around in it. But I definitely would have liked to have had a map to look at to have some reference of where I was. There's a lot of times here where you're gonna need to go back to where you were because you found a key or you unlocked some secret, but the amount of time you spend doing that and not having fun fighting enemies is just too high. And a map would definitely help solve that because these levels are just so huge. You can pick up Salt and Sacrifice on the Epic Games Store for 20 bucks, and honestly it's worth just a bit more than that. It has about a 20 to 25 hour campaign with high replayability due to the build options, with great combat and only a few minor design risks that didn't really pay off. So I'm valuing Salt and Sacrifice at $24. But if you're getting this game because you love the original Salt and Sanctuary, then think twice. It's a very fun game, but despite its looks, it's certainly a departure for the series. I hope you enjoyed this review of Salt and Sacrifice. Come see me on Twitch where you can watch our reviews in progress. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Until next time.